I sure am glad the pandemic's over, and nothing like that could ever happen again. It was nice while it lasted. Hi Gabsia. We just survived COVID, and all it took was one cruise ship to set the internet on fire. When I was researching for this video, I originally just wanted to talk about this hantavirus outbreak and make a few Titanic jokes. But it quickly turned into, is the world prepared for another pandemic, and how did COVID change the way we all think? Turns out that's a pretty complicated question for an idiot like me to answer. And most of the questions you'll have during this video have something to do with people being scared. Because scared people do stupid things. Remember that. I guess it doesn't really help that everyone's panicking at the thought of being locked in their house for another 2 years. Anyways, get ready to go down the rabbit hole because I did, and now you have to. We're kinda prepared for another pandemic. I mean, sorta. And to understand what that means, you need some context on hantavirus. We've known about the virus since the 70s, but if you take a look at Google Trends, people only started caring about it recently. But why? It's a disease carried by rodents, just like the rat bite fever or the bubonic plague. And if you get infected, there's a 40% chance you die. The virus starts by filling your lungs with fluid, which can make it difficult to breathe, your kidneys to fail, which causes a buildup of vomit and diarrhea at the same time. By the way, did I mention that there's no cure? So when you put it like that, it kinda makes sense that people are freaking out. But these outbreaks have been happening for decades and never made global news. So what's the difference? Well, the passengers on this cruise ship came from 28 different countries. And if they're all being scheduled to go home, you can kinda see where that might cause a little bit of a problem. Also, these Antarctic cruises cost anywhere from $4,000 to $20,000 per person. And people have always cared about what rich people do with their money. Especially in this economy where I feel like a trust fund kid because I spent an extra dollar on a large fry at McDonald's. As of today, they've already started sending passengers back to their home countries, and the internet is not happy about that.
As a person with a family, stay on that boat.
Stay on that boat.
If it makes the people trapped on that boat feel any better, if I had anything to say about it, you'd never get off.
Technically, the odds of a hantavirus pandemic are low because it just doesn't spread as easily as COVID did, so you can go ahead and return all that toilet paper you bought. You won't need it. Probably. But what if the virus mutated and started spreading like crazy? Would we be ready for that? And the virus isn't even the scariest part, because there's something more important we have to address. A lot has changed about the world since COVID, but are we moving in the right direction, or are we going backwards? Remember back in March 2020 when the first COVID quarantine started? I was 13 years old and my friends and I were busy celebrating 2 weeks off of school. So young and so stupid. I wonder how we would have felt if we knew how bad things were gonna get. As soon as people realized this might be serious is when all hell broke loose. Every store was out of food, every shop was closed, and now you're telling me I have to wipe my ass with 1 square of toilet paper? Like, how do you get away with reselling toilet paper for $100?
All these other ladies and gentlemen were running for toilet paper. The staff member said, "It's okay, ladies, there's lots of toilet paper."
For most people, the quarantine was difficult both financially and mentally, especially if you didn't have the option to work from home. Unemployment was at an all-time high, small businesses were closing left and right, and I'm pretty sure Gen Z had their social development stunted for a few years. At least that was the excuse I used for a while until I realized that people didn't want to talk to me because they thought I was weird. To be fair, I wasn't really going out of my way to learn how to talk to people. I just kind of ran away from situations where I had to hold a conversation. But I don't think that being encouraged to stay inside the house all day really helped anyone. Oh, but Gabsia, quarantine was so awesome. I just got to play video games and order DoorDash all day. And to that I say, good for you. Some of us did pick up new hobbies and skills since there wasn't really anything else to do. That's the reason why I did art and started a gaming channel, even though I kind of sucked at both of them. But if you were lucky enough to cruise your way through COVID and you think you could do it again, by the end of this video, you'll understand why that's not the case. The people who benefited the most from quarantine were billionaires and anyone who made their money from online streaming services. A lot of your favorite creators probably exploded in popularity when COVID hit. Everyone being forced to stay indoors meant that companies like Netflix, Facebook, and YouTube all saw record high usage after 2020. I just learned that during the pandemic, there was 1 new billionaire made every day. Most of them were higher ups in companies that benefited from the healthcare boom or the stock market. And because a bunch of small businesses were closing down, larger companies were able to create monopolies over everything people were buying. Amazon was by far the best example of total market dominance. It's not like you could pop into the store whenever you wanted anymore, so a lot of businesses started selling their products through Amazon. And whether you liked it or not, there wasn't really anything you could do about it. Basically, if you're in the working class and don't already have $1 billion, another quarantine sounds like a nightmare. Not to mention how many people died from COVID. I think a lot of people forget about that, especially if you don't know anyone personally who lost their life. But COVID had a 2% mortality rate before the vaccine. Meanwhile, hantavirus is at 40%. I feel like most people got by on the fact that COVID was only life-threatening if you were elderly or had some underlying health issues. But the amount of global panic from a hantavirus lockdown would be unheard of since the Spanish flu. During COVID, hospitals had to outsource help to get everyone treated. So when news came out about this hantavirus outbreak, everyone's first thought was, please don't let this be another pandemic. Or maybe if you were in the class of 2020, it was, we didn't even get a graduation. Well, maybe you should have been born a year earlier. Try that next time. The point is that everyone has their own reasons for still being exhausted from COVID. And that's part of why a hantavirus pandemic would be so awful. It's not only because the virus is scary, but people just haven't had enough time to recover. People remembered that initial COVID panic and how uncertain everything was, and so the gut reaction to anything hantavirus is how that ship better make like Titanic and sink. When public uncertainty is at an all-time high, people get scared. And when they get scared, they start looking for anything to give them that sense of stability, even if that means completely ignoring common sense. Because scared people do stupid things. Every time I go on the internet, I keep seeing these crazy hantavirus conspiracy theories, which is weird because the outbreak basically just happened. Like, when did you have time to figure all this out? Well, I did a little research and found out exactly what's going on. Hantavirus is either a government bioweapon or it doesn't exist. It's one of those two options. There's not really an in-between. Maybe that's actually my fault for assuming that people would do any research before opening their mouth on the internet. But it's pretty interesting to see how people are managing this uncertainty nowadays. I feel like that says something about how people will latch onto just about anything to feel like they're closing that knowledge gap. Just listen to this for a second, because it gets a lot weirder than you'd think.
I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but did anybody else know that hundreds of vials of deadly viruses went missing after a lab breach in 2021? Take a wild guess what one of those viruses was.
Something that bothers me about this video is how it says so much but doesn't actually explain anything. I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but something's going on here. It feels like they just put together a bunch of random events and then they want me to figure out what that's supposed to mean. I'm not good at conspiracy theories, I just got here. So 300 virus samples went missing and only 2 were hantavirus. Yeah, so obviously someone started this outbreak on purpose. Okay, well what about the rest that went missing? They're probably saving them for later. Who? I don't know, the elites? And didn't the samples go missing 5 years ago? Huh? Yeah, it was because the freezer broke. What? So shouldn't the virus be dead by now? Stop asking me questions! All it took me was 2 minutes to find out that the missing vials and the hantavirus outbreak were completely unrelated. By the way, Google is free, just in case you want to use it in the future. But what's even weirder is how this is the theory that people chose to run with. Especially because it's kind of a boring one too, because some of these theories go way deeper. Real quick for some context, there was a travel vlogger on that ship named Jake, and he posted this video right as the outbreak started.
We're not just a story, we're not just headlines, we're people. All we want right now is to feel safe and to get home.
On the surface, it just looks like he's a guy who was in the wrong place at the wrong time. Apparently he posted on the wrong platform too, because all the comments are making fun of him. A home is a feeling, not a place. 25,000 likes. To love is to let go. It seems pretty straightforward, but some people are convinced that this guy's a paid actor, or that he's part of a larger scheme to distract us from the truth. What truth, you might be asking? I don't know. Honestly, I don't think anyone knows, but they're still 100% convinced. There are verified creators who are promoting these theories to their audience, and people are actually believing it.
So you're telling me a few weeks ago his videos just randomly started popping up on my page, and he just happens to be on this ship that happens to have this virus, and he just You guys kind of get where I'm going, right?
Why is this video so low views? The last ones have millions. They're silencing this video. Look up what hanta means in Israeli slang. Haunt us virus.
Coincidence? Yeah.
Leave it to the internet to make the worst sentences you've ever had to read. I kind of feel bad for the guy because it's not like he has any control over the situation. You think that he chose to be put in solitary confinement for 8 weeks? Like, why would he demand a quarantine in Nebraska of all places? I bet the ship was probably nicer anyways. What is that? That's the food on the ship? But let's check in with Jake and see how he's doing.
Good morning, it is day
Okay, that's enough. Everyone just wants to feel like they have control over the situation, so they band together to do the only thing that they can, which is to make up weird stories on the internet. But when you have a bunch of people saying stupid stuff back and forth, they tend to validate each other. And that has consequences that are much scarier than a little virus. Which is part of the reason why I don't think we're ready for another pandemic. Because if this relatively small scale event was enough to start this much discourse in a week, can you imagine how chaotic things would be in a worst case scenario? If you thought that getting through COVID would be enough to stop people from believing everything they saw on the internet, you would be wrong. That's actually why these stories spread so fast, because fear makes people irrational. Like I said, when people get scared, they'll do anything to try and find that sense of stability, and that's why people are latching onto these conspiracy theories. I don't even know if the people who are posting them believe what they're saying, or if it's just for views. So there's your answer. We're not prepared for another pandemic because everyone believes whatever they see on TikTok. Sorta. And the reason I say that is because you could technically blame everything on TikTok fear-mongering and people falling for engagement bait. But after doing some more research, I realized that that was only a fraction of the problem. The real problem happens when nobody trusts the systems that are meant to keep us safe. Because there's a lot more going on here, and things are only getting more complicated. If we had a hantavirus pandemic, it would be horrible, obviously, but the only thing I hear people talking about is how they don't want to shit themselves to death. And don't get me wrong, that's a totally valid thing to be concerned about. But the world's gotten a lot more complicated since 2020. You'd think after COVID, we'd be scrambling to make sure we could handle something like that in the future. But it kind of feels like we're being dragged backwards, and that's not a coincidence. If you live in America, you'd know how much of a mess it was trying to get anyone on the same page during COVID. When the pandemic first started, nobody knew what was going on, so we were looking for anything to keep us grounded. Whether that was your family or maybe a 2-week Minecraft phase, everyone was looking for something to make us feel a little less lost. Wouldn't it be nice if we had a smart, capable leader to lead us towards a sense of normalcy? Did I mention that 2020 was a presidential election year? No one could agree on anything and it was so exhausting. Even something as simple as if you should wear a mask in public was a huge debate among people. I went to one of a few small schools where in-person learning was still an option for students, but even though you had to wear a mask to attend, some kids would just wear them like this, and then they'd explain to me how this is just as effective, or they'd go on a rant about how wearing a mask was stupid anyways. I feel like I wore myself out trying to explain the basics of pandemic safety to people, but I can't really blame those kids for being so loud and wrong either. Like I said, I went to a small school where everyone had known each other since they were little, but that kind of environment makes it almost impossible to trust anything from an outsider. And this wasn't just happening at my school, it was kind of everywhere, especially because we spent way more time staring at our phones during quarantine. Everyone was in their own little echo chambers, which made it that much harder to trust new information, which is kind of horrifying no matter who you are or what you believe. The idea that during a pandemic, life-saving advice can go over your head because of where you live or who you hang out with, especially when everyone's scared and has their guard up, because fear closes people off and makes it harder to trust. And that's kind of a problem if you're trying to convince millions of people to go into lockdown. If the government came out tomorrow and said, hey, so hantavirus started spreading out of nowhere and we're gonna have to do another lockdown, but don't worry because we got this all under control, I'm pretty sure a lot of people just wouldn't believe them. I mean, how do you expect people to cooperate after putting up with years of controversies and false promises? Groceries haven't gotten cheaper, gas prices are still going up, and the US isn't even a part of the World Health Organization anymore, which we'll talk more about later. But every time you turn on the news, it feels like we're constantly getting screwed over. It just feels impossible to try and keep up with everything. I don't know what I'd do if I had to research and talk about this stuff all day. Can you imagine what would happen if we had another pandemic tomorrow? We barely got it together during COVID, and you expect the same people to do better with a disease that turns your lungs into a wet sponge? I don't even know if we have the resources to physically deal with something like that. I mean, we're still recovering from the economy collapse during COVID, so it makes sense that nobody trusts our leaders to take care of things, because people would rather be on guard and feel protected rather than feeling like they got manipulated. And that sucks because when we are on the right path, we're not unified enough to make it effective. At first I thought hantavirus was the problem, and then I thought it might be misinformation and how quickly we all are to overreact. But misinformation spreads fastest when people stop trusting the systems around us. And those systems we rely on to keep us safe completely break down under pressure. When the world shuts down and nobody knows who to trust, everything starts falling apart. And what happens after that isn't something we're ready for. One of the weirdest things that happened during COVID was people acting against their own interests to stay loyal to a political party. It happens a lot more than you'd think, but it sounds kinda crazy if you've never seen it before. For example, I know a lot of people who didn't get the COVID vaccine because their favorite political commentator told them not to. And I get that some people have valid reasons for holding off, because it's not for everyone, but it shouldn't be because this guy said so. Bro, have you heard about the new COVID vaccine? Because I'm not doing that. Oh, do you have allergies? Nah, bro, I just don't want another man to caress my leg. face. What? But that's kind of what happens when public health gets confused with political identity. Things like wearing a mask became a statement instead of just a medical tool. So of course you're gonna have people feel strongly about it when influencers label everything with political buzzwords. It's also hard to notice these things happening to you because it takes place over such a long period of time. And what makes it worse is that the system was designed to be this way. Or to be more specific, modern politics rewards outrage. The people who are the loudest and can tap into that sense of fear are the ones who benefit, even if that means sharing conspiracy theories that you don't actually believe, which doesn't really help anyone, but it's so much worse during a pandemic. Instead of actually learning how to keep themselves safe, some people just bank their entire health off a vibe check. Listening to professionals doesn't really mean anything anymore if there's no one you can trust. The problem isn't a virus or figuring out if we're gonna have another pandemic, but COVID exposed that if we don't trust the systems we rely on, it might be impossible to have a coordinated response. But how would that situation actually play out? We've talked about how COVID changed the way people think about pandemics and why I don't think we're ready for another, but what does a worst case scenario actually look like? Is that something we could ever recover from? Let's pretend it's been a few months since the outbreak and the government announces we're going into full lockdown. You go on your phone to check TikTok, cause what else are you gonna do? And you see this.
We seem to have things under very good control. They know that virus very well. It seems to be okay.
How cooked are we? And can you put it on a scale of 1 to 10? Well, first, the World Health Organization announces that the death toll has just reached 1,000. And since the US left the WHO in 2026, here's some stuff that we just don't have anymore. Things like worldwide surveillance, influence on a global scale, and access to the fastest supply of real-time pandemic data are no longer available. And it's not like we can't do anything on our own, but there's a reason that almost every country in the world is in the World Health Organization. Managing millions of people's health is already a hard job, but now we've lost our main source of external support. So we might have shot ourselves in the foot with that one. I guess we'll see. But Gabsia, at least we still had the CDC. It's not like they fired everyone over there too, right? 30% of the CDC got laid off in 2025, and they've lost $11 billion worth of funding. My cousin who studies health sciences explained to me why this is so concerning, so now I get to sound smart too. Real quick, the DHHS oversees everything from food and drugs to medical services, which also includes the CDC. So when they do these massive cuts, it makes it harder for people to do their jobs. Usually the CDC's only in the news when something goes wrong, like if they aren't able to contain an outbreak. So news reporters everywhere would be asking one question: how are we gonna beat this pandemic? But that's the problem. Once things get this bad, it's already too late. And with less resources, they're just not as quick with updates about how we're doing. And what sucks is that it's hard to make people care about something if it's not directly in their face. So even if you've been waving red flags for years, the best time to act has already passed. Speaking of past, the death count just crossed 100,000. And there still is no cure, so people are sharing fake ones on TikTok because scared people do stupid things. Did you know you can boost your immune system by eating raw rodent flesh? And it can be any kind of rodent, so squirrels count too. Already we've seen a repeat of what happened during COVID, but worse. And this time, nobody's celebrating a week off from school because everyone's horrified of what's to come. But some people are still refusing to quarantine because hantavirus is a government scam, okay? All canned foods are off the shelves and the cleaning aisles are empty. People are quitting their jobs because they're scared to go outside. So now you're in a self-checkout line behind a guy scanning 500 cans of beans. The economy just crashed, supply chains are slowing, and Gabsia's still making videos cause he's goated? Dude, you're actually so corny. What? I really hope this video ages well, because I'm not trying to manifest anything. But is there anything we can do to make that not happen? Is there any takeaway from this video, or should we all just never go outside again? The good news is that we haven't had another pandemic yet, so it's not too late to prepare. I know it's hard to research and stay on top of everything going on in the world, but if you take new information for what it is, you're less likely to have biased opinions. And we need more critical thinkers, because information is powerful. Anyways, enough with all that preachy shit. I made an Instagram if you want some extra content, or if you just want to send hate. Okay, now click all the buttons and go watch this video. See ya.